Hello, everybody. We're very glad to see you all today for one of the series of the Library Talks. It's a very special one. We're bringing in the world of entertainment, as you can see. We're very happy to have Amber Heard with us today. Thank you so much for being with us. I'm sure you know her much more from all the blockbusters. I've heard that there's Aquaman that's going to be coming, or that's already out. Not quite sure. It's coming out.
It's already out. I'm in trouble.
There's a Justice League and any other movies that you know her of. But today we'll see a completely different picture of Amber Heard, because Amber is also an advocate for tolerance and against discrimination. She's a human rights champion with the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights. So we're very happy to discuss women's rights today and LGBTI rights as well. These are issues that are dear to Amber, and they're really dear to her heart. So I'm very excited to present her, and I would like to ask Laurent Sauveur, he's Chief of External Outreach for the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights, to say a few words more about the human rights aspects. Thank you all for being here.
Thank you, Sigrun. Thank you, everyone who organized this wonderful talk. I'm Laurent Sauveur. I'm the Chief Director of Communication at the UN Human Rights. And it's really an honor and a privilege to introduce you to somebody who has become a friend, Amber Heard, that you certainly know because she's a world-renowned actress. She's a global ambassador for fashion products. But for us at the UN Human Rights Office, what we're the most interested with is that she's a deeply committed advocate for equality, gender equality, the freedom to choose one's sexual orientation, the freedom to be oneself, to be human. And this is why, and it's been a few months that we are working with her. She's a human rights champion in a year that we celebrate the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, 2018, its 70th anniversary. She's a human rights champion who's promoting and defending these enduring principles that nowadays are maybe a bit forgotten by some of our global leaders. Amber is on a European tour. She was last week speaking at the One Young World Summit, where she touched upon various issues, equality, but also migration, which is very dear to her heart, and she'll explain why in a little while. So with no further ado, I'm very honored, like I said, and privileged to introduce you to Amber Heard. And the talk will be moderated by my friend Thomas Neufing, whom you know if you have attended this storytelling session. Thomas is the Chief of Learning and Multilingualism at the UN here. So Amber, Thomas, the floor is yours. Have a great conversation, and thank you all for coming and participating in this event. Thank you.
Thank you, Laurent. Welcome, everybody. I think we are all thrilled to have you here, Amber, today. I'm personally totally thrilled. I'm sure that your stage fright is less than mine today for this event, because the room is really full. But again, we're really, really happy that you're today with us. And we would like to hear your story. And this is storytelling at the library, after all. So it's all about you, about Amber. First question, how did you become an activist? What inspired you?
You know, I think it's funny. I'm used to telling stories. It's part of my job. Can I move this closer? Does that sound all right? I'm not normally accused of not being heard. Pun intended. So I'm a storyteller, but I feel deeply honored to be here with you guys today to tell a different kind of story, to tell my own in some ways, but to tell a story for those of whom I feel both incredibly privileged and honored and inspired to tell the stories of. As I see my role as an activist in this regard, and this is kind of how I got into it, as really just being a way to amplify the voices of those of whom who have not yet found their voice or whose voices are not yet amplified themselves. And so, merci beaucoup pour l'invitation.
Wow.
Thank you. Took a lot of training. Well, I guess if I was speaking about how I got started in activism, I think it's not a moment when you become an activist. I think many in this room could relate or understand what I mean by that. It is the increasing awareness of your duty, your obligation, and your privilege to be part of that which is most important, which is helping others and pushing the conversation and the futures of others forward. When I was a little girl, I grew up in Texas near the US-Mexican border. I'm the daughter of a construction worker who worked alongside mostly Latino migrants. And these people were they lived in my home. I considered them my friends, my family. And we would often, as my dad accrued more and more godchildren who resided on the other side of the border, having made these connections, we would take trips back and forth the border often. And it was specifically upon the return trip, that I started to be left with the unforgettable and indelible impression that's left on my soul, that which we can all relate to from our earliest age. I think children, which is that of injustice, unfairness, which is something I think even children, especially children, pick up on. And that struck me particularly on those return trips, when I was sitting in the backseat, relative comfort of the backseat of my dad's pickup truck, and leaving my friends and family on the other side that could not cross, those that had already been deported or could not yet get across, and traveling in both directions freely to a very different world, based on nothing more than the simple geography, the accidental geography of my birth. That I, born just a few miles north, speaking in the same accent and feeling very much a part of the same socioeconomic status, north of the border, I thought, simply due to where I was born a few miles north of this line, that I had the freedom to travel back and forth as I saw fit, and have a chance at this life that so many, hundreds, thousands, and thousands risk undertaking in order for a mere shot at an opportunity to have that which I was just awarded due to this accidental luck of my birth on the other side. And I think that was when it first started to pick up on the sensation that really never leaves you and allows you a model to which you can impart on other aspects of your life. So I started doing work, once I moved to Los Angeles, I started working in the children's hospitals and trying to just do my part in giving back to assuage that gnawing sense of needing to do more, knowing there was more to do. And it led me to work with Amnesty International, where I participated in research missions to the border. And starting in 2009, I had the privilege to go and see every step of the way an already growing crisis that was happening around the border as a cartel and other criminal systems were taking over that area. And I had a chance to participate in these missions and see everything from the deportation trials to the safe houses to the underground networks to the border crossings to the depot centers on both the north and south side of the border. And it was on these missions that I became a sort of de facto translator, having been raised speaking with a certain accent that is applicable and relatable to a lot of the people who are most vulnerable to this migration process or some of the worst parts of it. And I started collecting their stories because they felt more comfortable speaking to me. And it was on these trips, I would speak to mostly women who would otherwise not be as forthcoming with, say, one of my male counterparts, another white man in an official-looking suit might be less, desirable to speak to about your experiences, especially if you're wearing the physical and emotional manifestations of abuse that women typically disproportionately suffer at the hands of every stage of this broken process, this broken system we have in the United States. And I would ask them, after hearing their stories, this question that, is this, it's in futility, but that's irresistible for a human to ask, which is, what do you need? And without fail, the vast majority of responses I received from people, these women, was not justice or retribution or help or financial or immigration help or connections. It was baby formula. And whether they were themselves unable to produce nutrients for their baby due to the conditions that they were living in, that made them incapable of producing nutrients for their offspring naturally, or they were traveling with one of their sisters or their friends or someone they cared about. It was that deeply human, undeniably selfless human impulse to help one another as a part of a bigger community than just one. It struck me, this is something that has carried forward in my work later with organizations that provide medical aid or research to refugee camps in the Middle East. My most recent one was to TheLibrary, the largest Syrian refugee camp in the Middle East. And I had the same experience amplified yet again when I would go into the hospitals and spend time with children or people who were living in some of the world's most appalling conditions, in the most disparaging situations, and looking at them having survived indescribable odds. Thank me, look me in the eyes and thank me for the hug I gave them, the time I gave them, or for any possible potential offering of hope that my presence somehow inexplicably could have offered them. It was somewhere in between the smile of this little girl named Wiam, who was dying, just waiting to die, based on the fact that in the Syrian refugee camp, their allowance did not afford her or her family the amount that she needed to provide for her these monthly treatments required in order to stay alive with this condition. It was somewhere in between, as she smiled at me through yellow teeth, yellow eyes, and yellow skin, and she's thanking me for my time, and with hope and brightness and optimism and beauty. It was in moments when she thanked me for the weird face that I gave her dad when he walked in, which was the face that he, being her dad, thought maybe my presence and the presence of the organization with whom I was traveling could potentially somehow offer some help. Even if it was in the alleviation of the symptoms. And it was a space between that smile and the eyes of her father that I was reminded of those conversations I had with those countless women who asked me for baby formula. That this is not about, this isn't about the migrant. This isn't about the border or the policies that drive people from their homes in record numbers, which is what we're facing today. It's not about the inspiration you give women to leave dangerous situations or to speak out against people more powerful than them in order to make a better life for themselves or their daughters potentially. It's about the fact that we're all human and we're all fighting for the same thing that little girl Wiam was fighting for. We're fighting for more than policy change or the other person or ourselves. It's about the fight for life. That if somebody like these people that have inspired me so much and taught me so much are fighting so hard, even though, in contrast to these incredibly difficult, disparaging conditions, but despite all that adversity, that there's still something to be gained from life. And humanity, that's humanity to me.
Thank you for sharing that. And also, I actually wanted to ask you that question, whether it was an encounter meeting somebody on your missions or your advocacy trips that touched you and profoundly changed you. I think you just mentioned that encounter with this girl from this trip that you returned to recently. Now you're a human rights champion with the UN Human Rights Office. That's also one of the reasons why you're here. Why the Human Rights Office? Why the Universal Declaration of Human Rights?
You know,
Why are they important?
well, I couldn't find a better organization that encapsulated and encompassed principles and ideas more aligned with my core values. Like I mentioned before, don't see these issues or the humans they affect as isolated causes or isolated problems. We only become increasingly aware of our interconnected global community, that we are members of said interconnected global community, and as access to technology only increases, our access to information, to engagement, to resources, it also increases our responsibility and awareness of the world's increasing demand for action. And I just see myself as a part of that, and finding an organization like the Office of the High Commission for UN Human Rights. I find that, you know, serving as their framework is this incredible text written 70 years ago. I think it's the 70th anniversary this year. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights is a beautiful document because it codifies that which we all fundamentally know to be true, and accept that we as humans are all born with inalienable rights, dignity, that we all deserve dignity as human beings under the law, that protects our basic freedoms, no matter what our gender, our race, our nationality, orientation, religion, that we are all humans, we're all human beings, and we deserve the same rights. So, I'll just say UDHR, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights.
We love acronyms here at the UN. Welcome.
Yes, I understand why you do.
We love acronyms.
But UDHR, to me, in its simplicity and its elegance, simplifies and codifies the basic elements of what we as a society, as a global community, need to strive to adopt and incorporate and fight for. UNHR as an organization fights to defend and protect the principles as they are laid out in the UDHR. So I couldn't find a better organization more in alignment with my values and what I do with my life.
Yes. And it's really at the core of the UN. We all recognize that. When we talk about the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, we have to also talk about Eleanor Roosevelt.
My hero.
What is she for you? I mean, is she a heroine? Is she a role model? Is she a women's rights fighter? Is she a human rights pioneer? What is Eleanor Roosevelt for you? Or are there other men or women that have deeply inspired you?
No one else. I'm joking. I remember learning about Eleanor Roosevelt when I was in school, and I just loved that she did so much for, she ascended to and accomplished such tremendous heights in both her professional and personal life, despite the age. Her progressive ideals that she fought for throughout her life were those that protected and defended the rights of all people, no matter their gender, their race, or their socioeconomic status. And I deeply appreciated that she did that as a woman in that time. She also was the chair of the commission that authored the UDHR. And I guess that, in combination with my personal respect for her history and what she stood for and her long-standing defense of human rights and women's rights and human rights, made her personal champion of mine.
Now, going back maybe to your missions and advocacy trips that you have been doing for a number of years, as we have heard, what are among the most important lessons that you have learned from those trips? Maybe also even with a view to your other life that we maybe also talk about a bit later in acting and being in Hollywood, which is a stark contrast. But what are among the major lessons that you have learned during those trips?
It's funny. I think often I'm asked, like, what I'm able to bring them. Often I'm thanked on those trips, and I think to me it feels funny because it's quite the opposite. It's what, as you asked, it's what I have taken from them. It's what I've learned from them. It's the fight for life, the undeniable, universal strife for not just survival, but for joy in that survival. It's the fight for life and fight to enjoy life that doesn't leave you. It leaves this indelible mark on your soul. It's in the people I have met on the ground who have turned incredibly heartbreaking, disparaging, or difficult situations, and they have used that as energy and fuel, as passion, and turned that into action. And they have done with that energy that which makes the world slightly better for even just one person, which we all know never stops there. I think, I'm seeing this more and more where I want to point to a leader or a person, a public figure, or an activist even, and that is important too, but more and more, especially these days, I'm seeing examples of those heroes, of the women and people I'm looking up to that are changing the world, are increasingly not members of powerful parties, nor governments, nor outdated institutions, and the people that run them. It's increasingly in the hands of the citizen journalists, the citizen activists. It's increasingly in the hands of the people in this room and the people on the street. I've noticed this change increase dramatically in the last few years as we have transferred the microphone of power into the palm of our hands through social media and through the media itself. And in taking that power back, have they themselves become the agents of change, the leaders of change. I see this in examples more and more where I've asked about heroes or examples or role models. Increasingly have become less recognizable just by their name, but have done tremendous things to change the world without having a celebrity status or a political position of power or anything else, without having a social or socioeconomic wealth. It has been increasingly that woman who is a survivor of, say, sexual assault or racial discrimination or any other form of injustice aimed at groups that have a long-standing history of being the targets of this discrimination, and they have themselves done with that what could change the world to make it better. Amanda Nguyen, for example, is a young woman I met recently. I sought her out. She's an incredibly powerful survivor who took an incredibly difficult situation, took that adversity, and decided that she was going to change the laws that allowed the system that supported not just the injustice for her as a survivor, but also that protected the people that were the abusers, the violators, and the ones that stood to gain for them not being held accountable. And she decided to change the law that protected them, and then after that another law, and then another law, and before you knew it, she was just like that woman I met in on the border of Syria and Jordan, who had turned her house after taking 2 orphan Syrian refugee kids in. Asked a friend of hers to help do some emotional rehabilitation after they had suffered PTSD after being orphaned in bombings there, and then I go to her home, and it is no longer a home by any means. It is, as I was explained, as I was going up to another floor and yet another floor, that over time there were just so many kids, so many people. Same came volunteers, same came goodwill, donations of markers, of pens, of balls came, and before you know it, it's like that building encapsulates that spirit that I'm talking about, that we're, as I said to people yesterday in talking about this, that building perfectly encapsulates that in which I'm speaking about, power being in our hands, quite literally if you have a cell phone, and we all do. She just raised another floor up, another floor up, another floor up. And now she has the entire building, and so many lives are affected by that. It's in people like that. It's in the people like Amanda Nguyen, who didn't stop with that one policy change. They have since taken on, federal congressional bills and more. So, now the role models are here. And I feel incredibly honored to be able to amplify any voices that I can, because they amplify mine.
Amber, you're also a migrant. You're a migrant between now this role here as an activist, and you're also in the fashion industry. You're a world-renowned actress. How do you navigate between those different worlds? And they couldn't be more different than they are. What's your coping mechanism, to adjust to these different worlds? Be very interested.
There are no two worlds. I always like to say there's just no such thing, where it's just one big world, like it or not. And Hollywood has its own problems. It is very different in some ways, but strangely, Hollywood suffers from the same injustices, prejudices, and inherent flaws in the system that affect and permeate into all aspects of society and all businesses, whether it be found in gender parity, identification, representation, pay equality, inclusion, diversity. Hollywood's problems are the same. It suffers the same problems we as a society suffer under the weight of. In fact, I should note here that there's a certain amount of irony in the sense that Hollywood is often held up as some sort of bastion of progressive ideals, yet is actually, in reality, the exact opposite. We fall way behind on some of the most basic rights that we're starting, thank goodness, to take for granted in other disciplines and other businesses, whether it is inclusion, pay equality, representation, diversity, you name it. We fall way behind, and even more interesting is we are not only slow to change, it's the outdated institutions that keep those systems in place benefit a few people in power. And it's not that just it doesn't, I heard today, we were talking earlier, it's like, it's not enough that absolute power corrupts absolutely. It's the fear of losing that place of power that makes it worse. And that's what we see a lot in Hollywood. There are a lot of institutions and people desperately afraid of losing grip on that monopoly of power that they've had in controlling the narrative. And let's face it, in my business, it's an incredibly powerful medium. I wish today everyone read books like they saw TV shows and movies, sure. But let's face it, it's a ubiquitous, universal medium of translating and echoing our own society. So in many ways, Hollywood as an institution and people that act in it or as a part of it have an increased responsibility to change that representation and to change the narrative because we have an increased reach, because we have an increased power. And that's part of why I'm here with you guys today, and part of why I feel so motivated to participate in these kinds of conversations and be part of this sea of change, is because I feel incredibly lucky and blessed to have a position where I have a platform and my voice is heard. But with that awareness and with that gift comes an increased awareness of my responsibility to use it for good and amplify the voices of those who seek to change the world for better. Hollywood has that same responsibility, and we all need to be pushing for that change because that's the representation of our society. And it's the quickest way to deliver information onto us and affect changes in attitude. Changes in attitude will affect changes in policy. We can make laws all we want, but unless attitudes change, unless the conversations that produce attitude changes happen, then policy won't change or people won't care about the policy. It's about supply and demand. We have to change how the demand is articulated.
Interesting that you say that it's only one universe, and also here at the UN we have contradictions as well. And our Director General, he launched a No to Sexism campaign here as well in the House. It's also, contradictions that we all have to work on as well. We talked about migration at the beginning, and you have been born just outside of Austin, Texas, and today what is happening just outside the border. I think it's now we're at 8,000 migrants that started from Honduras are now approaching the US border. What is your reaction to this culmination of this event as well?
I think it's representative of a much bigger issue than just an administration's change to policies and how we deal with migrants at one of our borders. It is so much bigger than one administration's policies. This is a long-standing issue that has been exacerbated and result to increasing problems outside of U.S. border lines. This is a global issue. Whether you are on the shores of Calais or if you are on the border of Syria, or you are in Germany, or on the southern border of Mexico or the northern border of Mexico, this is a global issue. I think we're reporting that it's the highest number of displaced individuals since World War II. And I think right now we have the largest number of people migrating that has ever been reported, if I'm correct. The issue is a global one, and the systems and the causes of which are not being addressed adequately. And until they are, the solutions for the incredibly grave impacts they're having on the individuals to whom are most vulnerable to these conditions are fixed.
I think we want to give some questions, also some room for questions from the floor. So maybe my last question directly to you would be call to action. Although we have UN staff mostly here, it's not the normal audience that you talked about, still a call to action for our audience.
This is really exciting that I'm asked that question now. I'm very inspired when I am asked this question. I was speaking to a lovely, bright young person yesterday, and I will echo what I said to her, which is there is no power, there is no time like right now. Never in recorded history have we had so much power, the individual, the citizen activist. The citizen activist is why we see movements like the Me Too movement, Enough is Enough, Time's Up, Black Lives Matter. It's why these issues are sweeping over the world in ways in which they had never the power to reach before. It is why their impact is unlike ever before, because it is no longer left to activists that have a platform, or to celebrities, or to politicians, or outdated institutions, or the careers that those outdated institutions seek to protect by maintaining the status quo. The power is now, and will no longer ever be the same. Now the power is in your hands. It's in whether you work at the UN or you came here as a citizen. You now more than ever have the power in your own hands to mobilize, to utilize your resources, to access to information, not just to the information and to knowledge, but to the ability to do something with it, now more than ever. So it's an incredibly exciting, inspiring time for me to be asked that question, because now you could all be an activist. If you believe in women's rights, you believe in human rights. If you believe in human rights, you can be an activist. You can be an activist. And that's an incredibly inspiring and engaging thing. It's thrilling, and it makes me so proud to have a moment where I can share the energy that I see on the streets, and we see incredible change happen incredibly quickly because of that truth, because of that reality.
Wonderful. I would like to come every week, to repeat the speech that you just made. That would be wonderful. May not be possible. Now we take some questions from the floor. If I can ask you to identify yourselves and maybe keep it really crisp, rather a question, not a statement with 3 subsections, that would be nice. Who would like to go first?
Cool.
You're off the hook. No. So, would you like to ask a question, maybe? Huh?
I would love it if you'd like to ask me a question.
What's it like to be an activist?
Thank you. What's your name? Maya? Thank you for asking me that question. I think it is something that you maybe, if you're lucky, have the chance to get called, but it doesn't feel any different maybe than what you might feel when you feel like helping someone, like in your school, that might not have what you have, whether it's a voice, or maybe they don't have as many friends, or maybe you see something that's kind of unfair, and you make that little decision instead of gaining up on that kid that looks a little different, or not sharing some of the power you have. Maybe you're a great color or whatever, and you don't share it, or you do instead. You know that feeling you get? That's what it feels like to be an activist. It's the most rewarding experience ever.
Great.
You're welcome. Can't let Maya be the only one to take a hit, guys.
Yes, please. Microphone is on its way.
Thank you. My name is Paulina, and I work for the UN Human Rights Office.
Hi.
Thank you so much for coming here. It's lovely to see a young woman, a millennial, kind of taking on this role.
Thank you for calling me.
No, but it's, No, but it's nice. I mean, we have our office is increasingly young. I work with our big. We have a big presence in Ukraine, which is lots of really young, really motivated national staff who are there, who are fighting for human rights in their country, and it's the same way around the world, as you know. So it's so thank you for coming and using your voice. My question is about how you a little bit in navigating these two different worlds. How do you think about the stories that you tell through your films? Do you think about how you can participate in projects, using the platforms that you have to tell the kind of stories and to tell the kind of experiences that you have seen through your activism? Because I think that it's always really nice to see those stories, being told with such a wide audience. Through the medium of film or TV or et cetera. So it'd be really just interesting to hear your thoughts on that. And thanks again.
Thank you for your question. It's two-part. One, as I mentioned to before, or I alluded to before, on one hand, it is about changing it is about, first of all, using the gifts and the burden that I am inherently endowed with by the very nature of my public presence and the platform I have. My amplified voice gives me amplified responsibility to do the best with that, to do with that which is right and which can help others. And I'm very lucky to have that. It's because I have that I'm able to perhaps provide an amplified voice for those who don't have that. The other part of that, the other part of your question, I would answer in my increased awareness thanks to the groundswell of activism and the change that activism on the ground has produced, that has given me back the power to be able to demand for myself and within my own industry, as I mentioned, one of the most backwards and most, the industry with most to catch up on in many ways, to challenge that and my place in it based on the principles and ideals that are being pushed forward and spearheaded by people like you, the people that show up at the demonstrations, people who show up at the polls, the people that are demanding that the world and the world's leaders change things for the better. That is exactly motivating me to go back and not only carry the conversation on and amplify it, but also in my own world, say and push for, for instance, working on projects that have a 50-50 quota for male and female crews. Same with advertising world, because I work a little bit in that world as doing various beauty, as a beauty ambassador for various brands, for L'Oreal in particular. And in my place with them, it allows me to come to them and request that my projects and my involvement in various projects with them include not only 50-50 representation in the crews in production, but also in the opportunity for female directors to have their pitches be heard in equal, if not more, measurement to account for the dearth of representation and inclusion up until now. This is in an industry where women are represented 30% of the time, even though we make up over half the population, over half the ticket purchasing decisions, and over half the ticket going population. And yet we speak or named, we're in speaking roles or named roles 30% of the time. And that is not even taking into consideration the content of what we are saying. So it challenges me to do things like challenge for more inclusion, challenge my employers for pay transparency. I've been fighting for not just gender parity in representation roles, but also in pay equality. and fighting to have transparency, which is what I'm going to do moving forward on my projects in partnership with my male co-stars, is him and I together. Men are paid shockingly more than women, no matter what, in this industry. And so from now on, I'm going to ask that my studio be held accountable by engaging my co-stars who also want to see a more fair, equitable society, and who have nothing to benefit but from having a more equitable society, that they also advocate on behalf of transparency. And then hopefully there will be, and there will be, we just got to keep fighting for it, pay equality. Same with directors providing content, writers providing content. If we start changing the percentage of personalities, of people that have for all of time provided the lens by which we see our world projected through media, through entertainment, if we start challenging the disproportionate amount of times that responsibility is befallen on men specifically, and we start challenging these systems to say, well, what about if we look at this through the female gaze? If we're used to seeing our stories told 94% of the time through the male gaze, no wonder we feel underrepresented or misrepresented. And so your question, I'd say, would be answered in those two ways. It's been inspiring for me to take that conversation into my real life, my professional life, and start engaging and demanding for more equality on my side as well, behind the scenes.
Okay. One last. Lady over there. Yes, please. Microphone's coming.
Hello. I actually had two questions. So the first one is, what's your most remarkable memory working as an activist? And the second one is, do you think you would have become an activist if you weren't an actress?
Okay, it was a good question, the second one. I was not so happy since it was two, but I think it was a very good question. The second one is...
So the second one was, what do I think I would have done if I wasn't an activist? Or would I have been an activist?
If you hadn't been an activist.
Yes, I would have absolutely, there's no part of me that couldn't be an activist. You know, when I was a little girl, I was always accused of having a loud mouth, and as my mom recently commented, all I need to be told is I couldn't do it. But now, as a person with a platform and a voice, and being an actress, lucky enough to have that voice be heard, I'm extremely happy that those labels were true to me. You know, I didn't have NSYNC posters on my wall. I had Rosie the River on my wall. But being an actress gives me more power to hopefully do that and be more effective in doing that. And the first question was, I'm sorry.
The most remarkable memory as an activist.
You know, I think there have been so many, but you know, recently I was able to walk hand in hand with survivors from many different states in the United States. I was able to organize with the help of some very inexhaustible and energetic, driven young women to participate in our democracy. And I was able to organize and get these survivors in from various states and participate in a very important moment in American history, and participate in our democracy and walk hand in hand with those survivors who don't have the platform, who don't have the amplified voices, but have the experiences in the heart and the value, and in protecting or defending or amplifying the voices of those women and men, and where I could amplify their demand for justice and dignity and representation in some of our highest levels of government was a true honor and going into our nation's capital, holding hands with those women and men on such an important day was at least the most recent and profoundly impactful experience I've had as an activist. No matter what the outcome of that was, we changed attitudes, we changed the conversation, we changed the humans onto whom those conversations befell. And it wouldn't have happened without the combination of citizen activists, of global organizers, of social media, of impassioned hearts, of people like you have had enough and want to see things change. It wouldn't happen if I hadn't been there to also help amplify their voices. That was just certainly the most recent. But I look forward to more. This is something, I think we're all activists. You care about women's rights or LGBT rights. You care about human rights, and that's something we all have in common.
Amber, we came here today to listen to your story. I think you will all agree, we heard a lot, but you have to come again. There's a lot more to your story that we would like to. Here's my card, by the way, if you come by Geneva again. It was extremely inspiring, and I think it was a real, for me personally, of course, a privilege to meet you as well and to prepare the talk with you, but also to meet you and spend the time here on the sofa and with the audience. And I would really like to extend a cordial invitation to come again if you pass by Geneva next time again.
Well, I do talk a lot, so A, I accept, and B, you'll regret it. But thank you. I'm deeply, truly honored to share a room with you guys today. Thank you so much for including me and giving me the time to speak.
Amber.